Hey fan peeps, this is your podcast host Kunal here. I started this during the pandemic, and in this podcast I discuss my nerdy thoughts and hobbies with you, with the occasional special guest. From anime to Zeppelins, we talk about it all. Hi guys, how's everybody doing today? It's been a minute since I've done a recording, but I brought on one of my friends today who I've known since 2017-ish. It's been like five-ish years.
Actually, yes, it has been 5 years because I just had a Facebook memory pop up that said 5 years ago today.
No way, really? That's awesome. Okay, cool. Preparing for today's episode, and I'm like, there's no one thing that can really summarize what I want this to be. It's more of just like every time I see you, there's another side of you that I find out. I was like you've done so many different things. In a lot of ways, this might sound conceited, but you remind me of myself because you've done like 50 different things. And every time like, oh yeah, that's what wolves do. And I'm like, how do you know that? He's like, well, I worked with wolves for a while and stuff. But we'll get into that in the middle. So Kim, you want to say hi? You want to start off?
Hello, everyone.
Oh, listen to that nice voice. It's so sweet. Okay, I'll start us off with like how we first met. I was having so this is end of 2016. Yeah, 2016. And I am having a housewarming party at the first apartment that we started recording at. So if you call back to Lance talking about us recording in 3 different places, this was the first recording place. I had a picture of the dog from Cowboy Bebop hanging out on my wall, and I heard I was walking by and getting stuff ready, and I heard someone say, oh yeah, Cowboy Bebop. And I turned around and I see this person there, and I'm like, did you just talk about Cowboy Bebop? And you like looked at me all confused because you were brand new. I barely knew you at that point. You're like, oh great, he's talking to me. and I go like, you were talking about Cowboy Bebop? I was like, yeah. He's like, and of course, if anyone's been listening, that's exactly how you become friends with me right off the bat. What do you remember from that night?
Oh God, please don't ask me that. My memory of things is absolutely horrendous, and I, to be quite honest, couldn't tell you anything about that night.
That's okay.
If people start talking about situations and like describing things to me, like about 5 minutes in, I'll usually be like, oh yeah, like I remember all that now, and it'll all come back to me and I will be able to picture it and like see it, and then I'll start remembering things. But the way my brain works, like if someone just pulls up a random memory from a specific time and goes, oh yeah, you remember this, without any context, I am like a deer in the headlights. And
you're like, yeah,
kind of like,
yeah, that totally happened. Word.
Sure. Why don't you tell me about it a little bit, and then, yeah, sure, of course I do.
Yeah, totally happened.
Yeah, totally remember that.
Word.
Yep. Just nod and smile, and
the penguins from Madagascar or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
So how did you get into anime? Let me ask you that. What's your background? What do you remember like growing up watching anime for?
So I was basically just a loner nerd.
Welcome to the team.
In my childhood. And when we got home from school, we didn't have cable growing up. Mm-hmm. We only had like, what was it? KPLR channel 11.
Oh yeah. WB11 on Saturday morning cartoons.
And so
it's not like I remember or anything.
So we would watch stuff like, I don't know, Gargoyles and Freakazoid and Bonkers and like all that kind of stuff. Then I remember we finally got satellite, and when we would get in, it would be Toonami in the afternoons.
By the way, all those shows you mentioned, like I loved and watched them way too much.
I believe they released Gargoyles on Netflix not too long ago, and I started rewatching it after,
I don't know. On Netflix? I thought it was on Disney Plus.
Maybe. Was it Disney Plus? I don't remember. One of the streaming services that I use. But I started watching it again, and like from the first episode, and I remembered the dialogue from like I remembered all of it. Like I had just watched it 2 days ago.
We all have our qualms about Disney, but they are masters of staying in your memory. And it is ridiculous what you remember. Like the moment, like when we've done karaoke before, like that's one of the things that I think built our friendship is like, So the moment like these songs come and play in your head, like you mean like, oh yeah, 7-year-old Kunal remembers this, and he can just like sing a whole new world without any prompts. If you asked me to do it on the spot, I'd be like, I don't fucking remember. But if you give me the music, you'll be like, you know exactly what's going on. And
So you're like me in Social Memories.
yeah, exactly. It reverberates. Like I said, you remind me of myself in a very non-conceited way. Yeah, Gargoyles is another interesting one because every time I go rock climbing on the sporadic times that I do go, I always feel like I'm Goliath just trying to climb up
the sides of the building.
And I hear like the every time I'm getting a rock, and then immediately my forearms are dead and I fall, but the harness catches me, so it's all good.
You need some wings for gliding.
I do, and they're not growing yet. My lats can only do so much. So it's yeah. So you got Satellite?
Yep, we got Satellite, and so then Toonami was an option to watch. And of course, back then it was Dragon Ball Z. There was Outlaw Star.
Great underrated show.
Very underrated. I loved that show.
The caster gun on that was fucking phenomenal. It was a weird show. I love talking about Outlaw Star because it's a 26er. You have this like Gene Star, Starwind. It's a combination of The Fifth Element, Cowboy Bebop, and Firefly. A lot of space operas that are very popular, and they just put it in 26 episodes with a great voice cast, and they said, yeah, don't worry about it. And we never saw anything about it after that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It died.
And yeah, continue.
Yeah, so shows like that my brother and I would watch pretty religiously. And then my other favorite, which I don't know if most people even remember that this existed, but it was one of the first like 3D animated shows that I ever remember existing. And it was called Reboot.
I love Reboot.
Yeah. So you know what it was.
Oh, of course I know.
Okay. Because I say that and a lot of people are like, huh? What do you? And I'm like, they lived in like a computer and it was.
The problem was it was way too ahead of its time.
Probably.
And like the Matrix really hadn't cemented itself as well as it could have. I think it was technically post Matrix, but I'd have to check.
Yeah, but like kids wouldn't have been watching The Matrix at that point in time.
Right, exactly. And so for most people, it was like, what the fuck are you talking about? For me, I'm like, dude, Enzo Matrix? That dude was like a fucking badass the whole time.
I totally had a non-real human crush on Enzo.
Who doesn't?
When I was a kid.
Guy has like a fucking great, like, he has a golden eye that can target with his fucking glitch weapon. Dude, so much of that show is popping into my head right now. Oh
God, what was his pirate girlfriend's name?
I
can picture her, but I can't remember what it was.
She was beautiful too. She was like Ariana, something, Andrea, maybe? Potentially, yeah, something like that.
It'll come back to me at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. I'll be like, washing my balls in the shower, and I'll be like, oh fuck, it was this. And well, I mean, just in case you.
That's not how I'm gonna remember it, but
well, I mean,
whatever helps. I didn't really consider myself like a super nerd or like super into it. It was just like, well, this is another cartoon that's on. I didn't even really realize that like anime was its whole own thing. The other thing that I remember now that we're talking about it, so there was a movie back then in the 80s called Little Nemo.
Oh, Nemo.
That was one of the first full-length animated like anime films, I believe. I think that's correct. And I loved that movie. I just watched it more recently, like last year, and realized how incredibly strange and creepy it is for a children's movie.
Gotcha.
But that was another thing that I really loved. And then Spirited Away,
of
course, was like one of the first things that I watched.
I'll have to check out like the movie you mentioned. You said
Little Nemo.
Little Nemo? I've never heard of it.
It was actually really, really interesting. It's kind of cerebral for a kid's movie. So
sounds it.
It follows this kid who, while he's dreaming, he has lucid dreams and ends up in this place called Dreamland. And it kind of follows him through getting there and sort of getting into trouble without giving too much of the plot line away. But
sure.
Basically he fucks everything up and then has to fix it. And his adventures in Dreamland actually become adventures in real life. So like things that happen in his dream world end up spilling out into the real world. And there's this whole like juxtaposition of the two places. And it's like, I watched it back and I was like, wow, this is actually pretty deep.
Yeah.
When you were a kid, you just thought like, whoa, that's scary looking or weird or creepy, kind of like the weird pink elephants from Dumbo or something when he was drunk. But it's kind of got that vibe, like an Alice in Wonderland sort of thing, but a little more morbid.
Okay.
But it's really great. But it's a kid's film, so like don't expect too much from it.
Sure, yeah.
That was probably also one of the first introductions that I had to anime style. And I don't know, I've watched things ever since. As I got older, I ran into other people who were into it. Because when I was a kid, like, I didn't really have any friends who watched anime.
You know, same. I had a similar experience. Like when I went to, even in high school, I had a couple people. But when I went to college, everybody was like, oh yeah, I totally saw those TV shows or stuff like that. You just meet a wider pool of people.
Yep. Well, so same.
Yeah.
So in high school, I've always been like super self-conscious of what other people think of me. And in high school,
welcome to the team.
The type of kids who were like vocal about liking anime and things like that were equivalent to like the magic people and the D&D people, and they were considered weirdos. And I was like, well, God, I don't want to be considered a weirdo. Like, I'm already on the fringes. And I was like, I don't want to make this worse. So I just didn't talk about it. And I would like listen to other people talk about it and be like, oh, I'd really like to go talk to those people and be friends because like we're into the same stuff, but I also don't want to be seen with them right now.
Oh man, this is totally like the fourth season of Stranger Things right now.
Don't tell me anything I haven't watched yet.
Oh, okay.
I know I'm 2 seasons behind, but they also just dropped the new season of Umbrella Academy.
Oh yeah, they did.
And so now, well, everything else is off the table until that's done.
That's fair. That's fair. We need to know how the Sparrow Academy is running, why and how it's there, but. Yeah, so like that's pretty similar because it was a weird time. Like you also have to remember, this is 50 years after World War II has ended, so it's the 90s and stuff like that. So I don't really understand how it got to be the level of fame it did, but it was considered a really weird thing to watch or be interested in something media coming from a country where we just like ended a war with that their parents or grandparents were probably still talking about at that point. So.
Anything foreign was suspect in my house growing up.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I say it a bunch of times, but it's funny. My dad, he's like, yeah, this is so Asian. Why are you watching? And I'm like, don't we come from the same continent of Asia? Like, did that, or are we just like selecting borders at this point, Dad? And he's like, he didn't have an answer for me. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not Asian. So every year I'm like, oh, I'm Southwest Asian. And some people are like, oh, you're just not East Asian. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like I'm just absolutely tired of all these titles and barriers, and I was like, my family's from India. Like, people just ask me, where are you from? I'm like, my family's from India. It's just easy, gun, dot off the table.
Just say I'm a brown person.
I say that too, but then they're like, oh, de nada, and I'm like, fuck you, man.
Oh, no.
You know how many times I've been asked if I'm Mexican or Chinese? It's astounding.
I wouldn't be surprised, I'm sure.
In this city, it's like always fucking happening.
My Colombian friend growing up, and even still has been and is still constantly asked whether she's Chinese or not.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because she's Hispanic, but she's pale, and people can't fathom that could possibly exist. So
they don't imagine like a gradient for things going on. It's really weird because you can meet some people and they look, biggest air quotes, white, but then they'll speak Spanish, and it completely throws you off. I was like, oh no, like even though he's kind of dethroned in his popularity and prestige right now, Louis C.K. apparently is Mexican. And so it's just really weird. They always see things as one note, and that's incredibly disappointing and a constant theme that I often bring up once in a while. But that was a wild tangent, but I loved it.
Welcome to my brain.
I know, right? I honestly think those are the best conversations.
Yeah. Well, the connections in my brain happen, in half a second.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, this thing. And I start talking about it. And then somebody's like, hold up.
What are we talking about?
This has nothing to do with what we were just discussing 2 seconds ago. And I'm like, actually, in my head, it does. Let me explain. And I'll go back through and tell them how I arrived at this new subject matter. And then it makes sense. But I should probably do that preemptively instead of waiting for them to get really confused and stop me and be like, hold on, I can't be with you here because I need to go back and figure out how we even got to this in the first place.
Which is honestly entertaining to get to in the first place. Because Because then it's just like, oh, okay, we're just goofing off and having fun here. And segue, speaking of goofing off and having fun, we we also became really good friends doing karaoke. So
gosh.
I want to. Oh god, you're fine. We're not going to make you sing on this unless you did want to.
Don't do that to me.
Okay, all right. So after I met you that one time, I had mentioned at some point I wanted to do karaoke, and everyone fucking flaked. And then,
as always happens.
Seriously, like, they're like, oh yeah, my back's hurting. I don't know if I can sing today. I'm just like, I don't want to drink. I'm like, motherfucker, just get out there and fucking sing. Like, no one cares. Like,
I don't want to get that drunk tonight.
It's like, you don't have to drink and do this. You can do this sober. Most of the people that'll be there will be like so drunk they won't remember.
Just tell people, always just pick a song that everybody else knows. They'll sing along with you. Nobody will be listening to you, and nobody cares.
Nobody cares. No one's gonna remember your name, and if they do, they're kind of odd and it's a little weird. But it's okay if they do too. And then I heard that you go to karaoke all the time, and I was like, okay, cool. And then it would never match up with my schedule. And then one day, I remember this very clearly. One of my cousin's kids, Maya, she wanted us to judge like debate teams for her school. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, I'd love doing that. And totally like made me happy to like for the upcoming generation. Like I always hear stories of people like, oh, this generation is ruined and everything. And I feel like those are just the kids in front of Snapchat and not the evidence of the entire pool of people there. And it was really cool to see all these kids have these astute points in their arguments and just deliver great criticism, and there was a lot of intelligence, I was saying. And I finished that, and you shot me a text, and you were like, hey, we're going to karaoke. You just want to give you a heads up. And I'm like, I'll be there. And I remember in all caps, you're like, what? Really? Cool. I'll see. Because I had fucking flaked every time up to that. And I was like, no, I'm fucking coming this time. And I don't remember the songs I sang, but I definitely sang rap songs because that is my go-to thing all the time.
They were totally 80s rap songs.
They were 100% because they're so
I
goofy.
don't know them, but that's what they were.
I mean, I had just also seen a documentary on rap in general, from like starting from the 70s to today. And what the kids like to say, they slapped, they were bangers, they were bops, as the kids say these days. All of the above. And I was like, I'm going to fucking sing these songs. And I say this with full kindness. Typically, older black men would come up to me and give me a high five and say, that's how you sing that song. And I'm like, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. But then I'd see you sing, and people would like, it was like fucking watching Moses part the Red Seas. Everyone's like, oh fuck, we can't fuck around. We can't fuck around. It's like, you get up there and sing these songs like you had been a professional singer for 10 years. So tell me more about how this came to be.
Oh my goodness. So it almost didn't. I mean, I've been singing since I can remember. Like, I remember being like 4 or 5 years old, singing out the car window, driving down the street with my parents. Just like every
Adorable.
Disney song I ever heard or whatever it was, I'd run around the house singing. For all those young people back in the day, we used to have these little radios with an attached microphone that recorded you on a cassette tape. And I had one, and I would use it all the time to record myself singing or like reading books, things like that. I loved it. I was also a drama kid later, so
makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Explains so much.
But I just always loved singing in elementary school. Like most kids, like you have choir class and everybody's like, oh my God, like we don't want to be here. We don't care. We're not trying.
But we like singing, so we want to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I did that, and then I joined choir in middle school. Mm-hmm. I skipped it in high school just because my self-confidence was a lot more lacking at that age. I also skipped drama through high school, but that's neither here nor there. And then I got back into choir in college, where you actually had to try out. So my experience up to that point I never did solos or anything like that. Because you had to try out for solos, and the act of trying out terrified me.
It's nerve-wracking.
Like someone to listen to just me singing by myself, where they could hear every little thing in my voice, like freaked me out.
That would freak anyone out.
So altogether, I probably did choir for about, like 14 years. And I remember, and I've always loved to sing, and I've known, like, I'm not the greatest singer in the world.
Lies.
But like, I know that I'm good, right? But I had friends who were music majors and theater majors and things like that who were always so much better or so much braver to like put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh gosh, well, I can't possibly like compete with that. All of those like, you know, self-doubting thoughts and self-sabotaging that you do when you're lacking in confidence.
Again, welcome to the team.
So when I came back from college and I was finally 21 because I was younger than all of my friends, I was barely 21 by the time I graduated, and I came back home and we would go out to bars, and I had a couple friends who like did karaoke all the time, and they were decent singers, and they were like, oh, you got to do this, and I was like, nope, not doing it. I'm not getting on the stage by myself. I'm not singing in front of people. Like, it's not happening. And finally, one night, one of my friends, she was like, okay, I'll go up there with you and I'll sing a song with you. Like, just pick something easy. And I'm like, okay, fine. And to be fair, like, none of them had ever heard me sing. None of this group had heard me. I very rarely ever sang in front of other people other than the people who were in choir with me, obviously. Like, you know, my fellow altos and stuff like that. So most of my friends had never heard me before. So we got up, we did like a Spice Girls song or something like that.
As you should.
It wasn't Wannabe.
Good, because that's done way too much.
Because that one's too much, and it's a group. That's a bigger group song, I feel like, if you're gonna get up there and do it.
Word.
But I don't remember exactly which one it was. Anyway, doesn't matter. So I did that, and I was like shaking and like hyperventilating a little bit.
Aww.
But we got through it, and I did it, and I was like, oh, okay, like it was kind of fun to like have the crowd like be into it with you and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, so. Then I kind of started doing it more. That was in a smaller venue where like I knew most of the people that were there every week because we were there every week. Like it was a regular thing.
Right.
And we would go each week. I knew the bartenders. I knew most of the other patrons. So I felt comfortable, and I would just like kind of like hone my my skills there, I guess. So then that bar actually closed, and the owner also had Bar 101 out in Soulard.
Yeah, I did improv there, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so every Monday, we would go for karaoke there. We were there one night, and these two young guys showed up.
Talking like 10s, 8s, 7s. Like, how were they? Handsome?
So one of them was G.
Okay. So easy on the eyes.
So I'm getting there.
Okay.
So these two guys walk in, and it's this like super young looking white guy and a black guy, and they're sitting at a table by themselves. The rest of us were regulars.
Sure.
So they're sitting by themselves, just kind of chatting or whatever. None of us are really paying that much attention. Then the black guy gets up to sing, and holy shit, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was like, he did an Adele song and just nailed it.
Yep.
Like belting it out, ballad style, like hit every note perfect, and like did his own ad-lib stuff at the end and like improvisation, which I can't do. I get super weird about like, well, let me just take this and do what I want with it. Makes me super nervous. But he was just like killing it. And the other guy with him too, my friend Chris, was also very good. And we were sitting there, and my friend was like, we should go invite them over. Like, we should invite them to our table. And I am not somebody who can just walk up to strangers and be like, hey, how's it going, guys? Like, you want to come sit with us? Or at least at that time, I was not at all. Like, sure. I probably would have thrown up. But so she went over and invited them to come sit with us. And oh my God, that started my friendship with both of them, and we all became karaoke buddies for many years after that. And the three of us would go, I mean, we would drive sometimes 45 minutes on a weeknight to go to karaoke and hang out, because we would follow the DJs that had like the good equipment. Because we're apparently high maintenance karaoke patrons.
No. Like I tell you what, like ever since I've been running this podcast, I become a snob about it. Like, if I hear a podcast and they're like, oh, you should check this out, and they have bad sound or audio equipment, hard pass. Like, I click out of there immediately because it's just burning. It just burns in my ears, and I'm like, I can't stand this.
I feel that.
Yeah, like so you're totally justified in doing that.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how all that started, and the more we did it, and the more like I was around other people who were like really supportive and stuff, the easier it got. And I also through the years, in other parts of my life, gained confidence in myself and stopped worrying so much about what everybody thought.
It's a process. Yeah.
A very long and arduous process. That being said, even today, anytime I go to a new venue to sing and I get up on stage and I do my first song, you can't tell if you're in the audience, but I know I am shaking so badly that like while I'm up there, you can't see it, but as soon as I step off the stage, my hands will start going and like I'm like, oh, okay, I did it. It's okay. And I don't know why. It's not like, you know, I'm afraid that I'm not good or that, you know, I think that people are judging me or anything. Like it's just that anxiety that just doesn't go away. I used to get it before I went on stage with drama. Like the second before I went out, I was like, I'm going to be sick.
But once you get going, you're totally
Once
fine.
I was on the stage and in my character, totally fine. Yep. Everything was great.
Yep.
But that moment right before you step out and you're like, oh, fuck, I got to go do this. Like, you're just like, all right. Like, because once you're around from backstage, like that's it. Like you got to just be on and go.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something like that where you're like, okay, like now I've made it across this threshold of first song being done and out of the way. And now I can be comfortable and do whatever it is.
Conan O'Brien has this thing that I listen to. His podcast is really good. And he talks about every time he gives a speech, every time he gets on camera for a show, he is always nervous. And he's been doing this for like up to 30 or 40 years at this point. He's like...
There's no hope for the rest of us.
No, there really isn't. We're completely fucked like all the time. And he said something that I really carry with me, or try to, every time I get up on stage. Because every time I get up on stage to sing a song, even if it's a goofy rap song, my leg is always like just shivering. And it's always one.
The equivalent of Elvis' leg on the rock wall?
Yes. Like, and the blue suede shoes are not helping. So I am like shivering. And then once the song gets going, and I'm like, and then especially like when the crowd is quiet and they're listening to you, you're like, fuck, they probably don't like the song. But then at the end of it, they're all clapping and loving it. And I'm like, oh, I did okay. But what Conan says is something is like, if you're having the fear, that means it's a good thing. That means you care about it. That means you know this is a risk, no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have the fear, then it quite frankly wouldn't be that good. Because overconfidence in that manner, even people who seem overconfident, truly the good ones will have fear that they don't talk about. You know?
Yeah, no, I feel that. Like anyone I've ever met in any disciplines, be it singing, acting, even academic pursuits, artwork, things like that, anything. Anyone who has been really good has always been super humble and self-critical.
Yeah.
Because they're constantly worried about like whether they're doing it right or whether they're doing it well or putting everything they have into it and whether they could have done better. And that's not to say they're all like neurotic messes. It's just like you can tell the people who like value what it is that they're doing and want to do a good job with it. Whereas at least with karaoke, like the people who can get up on the stage and they don't give a shit.
No, yeah.
And they just sing, dance, whatever. They're off key. They're off time. They're kind of obnoxious to listen to, but they are having a blast up on that stage.
Yeah. You don't have to be perfect in everything you do. I mean, this whole podcast is based on hobbies and based on just like having fun with something you like. And that's something that more people should appreciate, I feel. That's why I started this podcast.
Yeah, just do. What was it from Encanto? The Perfect Sister? It was like, what if it didn't need to be perfect? It just needed to be.
Yeah.
So like...
Oh, yeah. That's a beautiful way. Good reminder.
You know, like everybody wants to be great at something when they start or when they do it. And so they have this fear of failing or not being good enough. And then so they just don't ever do it. And, you know, well, nobody's perfect at anything or great at anything when the first time they pick up a pencil. Like no artist picked up a pencil for the first time in their life and like created a masterpiece, you know?
Yeah.
Now certain people have
innate talent
for it and grow faster in it.
But that only takes them so far. That's the catch. Like,
but you still have to work at it, right? Yeah. Like you still have to practice. You still have to go out and learn different techniques.
They told Michael Jordan when he started out to go find a different career. Like that's something that always gets me is like one of the, like, even to today with all of our advances in physical fitness and changes and whatnot, still 30 years down the line away from his last championship, they are still like, he was a phenomenal player and probably will be remembered for decades to come. And even he was told, like, you might want to try, like, I don't know, selling cars or something like that. Like, you'd be better off that. So yeah, it's someone told me also recently, it's like, talent gets you in the door, hard work keeps you there. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't apply yourself or invest in what it is you choose to do, I mean, you're eventually going to hit a wall, and there's going to be somebody who may not have been as talented in the beginning, but who really is passionate about it and has been working their ass off and improving themselves, who's going to pass you up. Yeah. Because I feel like there's a problem sometimes with people who are very talented at something, or who it comes very naturally to go, yeah, I'm already good at this, and not bother to see where they could improve or look at their faults or their flaws. I mean, that happened for me in academia. I, growing up, was always a straight A student. I really, to be honest, I didn't have to try at school. Mm-hmm. I was always great at taking standardized tests. I feel like nothing was ever hard for me. And then I got to college, and I suddenly, being like pre-vet and animal science and stuff, working in areas where I was completely unfamiliar and out of my depth, I suddenly had to study.
Shit.
And I had never developed the skills to study, because up until that point, it was never really necessary. Like, yeah, I'd look at notes and stuff every now and then, but like, I was really lucky in that the system fit my style of learning.
Sure.
Until that point where there was all of this more complex subject matter that I needed to look into, and I was suddenly like, oh, I am very not prepared for any of this. And so that was like a big smack in the face of like, hey, now you're like everybody else, and like you have to like actually do things and prioritize, like going into professors' offices and meeting with them and being like, hey, I really need some help with like figuring this out. And that was hard for me to admit that, like,
humbling experience.
I'm no longer like the smart person who like everything comes easy to. Like, I now need help with this. Saying it out loud now, I'm like, God, I sound really conceited.
No, like,
but like it was kind of a wake up call that like, hey, like things that are easy for you, that only works up to a point.
Right.
No matter what it is, you'll eventually go far enough that you'll be like, oh, I need some assistance with this now. Like now my innate talent or whatever it was is no longer enough to get me through, and I need skills and things from other people to help me with that.
There is something to be said for like every time you reach a different tier, like your ability, your training, your talent can only take you so far, like we've been saying. One of my teachers said it the best. They were telling us about like what classes to take to go for, because we were like later in high school at this point, and they said, talk to your high school counselors on like what classes you think you do well in, because like, great, you can take the honors algebra class, fantastic, but will you flourish in it, or will you really struggle with it and get a bad grade? And is it worth taking that bad grade over really doing well and honing your skills further and further for the next year to get even better for that class? Mm-hmm. And I think there's building a foundation. That's a great way of putting it. And every time you reach a new tier, you have to reevaluate that foundation as you go. It's cool. I know you went to grad school and you started off in science. What made you interested in science, and then what you did in grad school? Could you briefly talk about that?
I mean, I was always interested in, we'll start with animals. So I was the kid who literally would carry around a book of 500 dog breeds or horse breeds or those National Geographic little like pamphlets on different animals. And I would just read those I also read fictional books and that kind of stuff, fantasy, sci-fi, adventure. I got grounded from them instead of TV as a child. That's how into them I was.
Have never heard about. I was like, you were so much of a nerd. Your parents told you to stop being a nerd. Wow.
They told me to stop reading so much.
Never like my parents would be turning. They're not dead. They're actually like doing fine and on vacation right now. But like I was about to say turning in their grave, but they're totally healthy. But like that came out really weird. What I was trying to say is like they would be shaking their heads and like throwing their hands up. And it's like if my problem was reading too much, my other problem was always watching too much TV. But anyhow.
So I was that kid, and I would memorize all the facts, and I loved to tell people about them, and I was always just like trying to learn as much as I possibly could about everything to do with animals. I was, I guess, a researcher early on. So like I had books on like ferrets, and when we had hamsters, I had a book on hamsters, and I read everything in it and figured out, all the things that you needed to know about taking care of them. And that's, I mean, anything that I was into, I would find out as much information as I possibly could.
Sure.
And so for me, all I knew at the time that you could really do with animals, right, if we were talking about careers, is veterinarian. Because like, what else do children know about all the career options that exist?
Exactly.
Nothing.
They don't do a good job of
we'd all be like
bridging that
policemen and firefighters and like
Congress,
rock stars
like
and
politician, I guess. Maybe. I don't know.
But I don't know any kid. Well, that's not true. I did know a kid who wanted to be a politician. But he was on a totally different end of the spectrum.
Maybe like president or something crazy like that. Like they would probably think of like
I'm pretty sure at some point if they had some sort of voting thing on like who's most likely to be president, he would have been on it.
Gotcha.
If that ever actually existed, I can't remember, but he absolutely would have been the one nominated for that.
Okay.
But so that's what I wanted to do. I grew up always having animals in my life, dogs, birds, frogs, and turtles that I caught that I, obviously as an adult know was not the best idea in the world. But as a kid, you don't know. I even I raised baby birds and baby rabbits that we found that like the dogs got into the nest or something like that. I rehabilitated a snake that my dad hit with the lawnmower. Like I was constantly just trying to help animals in some way, shape, or form. My mom used to get annoyed because I would always find stray animals and try and bring them back to find their owners and stuff. And she's like, just leave it alone. It'll go home. And I was always like, what? If it was my dog, I would be terrified that it was gone and I would want somebody to bring it back.
Yeah, it's broken leg will be
she's
fine.
like, it'll find its way home. Get it out of here. But so that was just in order to be a veterinarian, well, you have to go into science, right? And so I took all of those like zoology classes and things like that. And so that was kind of where my career was heading. I grew up helping out on the farm where I boarded my horse, and my grandparents had a bit of a farm too with goats and pigs and chickens and all that kind of stuff. So that was where I was going. And then when I was 15, I got a job at the zoo and eventually got in to be a keeper there and that kind of stuff. So that's the background of how I started getting into it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
And in high school, we had an assignment to shadow someone in their chosen career. So I shadowed a large animal vet. Loved it. Lots of driving to rural areas to go see cows, horses, and things like that.
I didn't know that.
But yeah. Okay. It was super cool. But I kind of decided after talking to the guy that I didn't want to just work on animals when they were sick or needed something, and I wanted to maybe not deal with people as much as veterinarians need to. A people lover, I was not.
That's okay.
So I was like, well, something with animal husbandry or training or something like that. I always kind of had this affinity, I guess, with animals. I remember being a kid at Lake of the Ozarks and getting the ducks to come up and eat out of my hand and hang out with me. And some of them would even follow me back up to the resort we were staying at and wait outside for me to come back out. And stuff like that. I always just kind of had this intuitive knowledge of animal behavior and interacting with the dogs and horses and things like that. And I really wanted to use that. So I went in as an agriculture major for undergrad, but that was another option for pre-veterinary. So I wasn't stuck doing something non-pre-vet. It was sold to me as they'll do more hands-on things than the biology people. The biology people do a lot of book stuff, a lot of labs. You'll actually be out on the university farm vaccinating cattle and doing palpations on pregnant mares and things like that.
Okay, gotcha.
That kind of stuff. And so that appealed more to me because it was more in line to what I wanted to do. Getting out of college, right around the economic crash.
Oh God, yeah.
Meant that I instead wound up working multiple retail jobs. So I was working all these part-time jobs with no benefits and like shit pay.
Capitalism. You gotta love it.
Yeah, like 80 hours a week and like making nothing.
Oh man.
But I had a couple things happen. My boyfriend at the time and I broke up. And shortly thereafter, my dog died in a freak accident.
Oh my gosh.
And I was kind of stuck and being, at a point where I was like, I'm not using this degree that I got. I'm not doing what I want to do. And I decided to go back to grad school. And I had been speaking to a woman from the University of Edinburgh about an online course that they offered in equine studies, which had been my area of specialization. And so we had been talking already about that. And I just kind of had this idea one day of like, you know what? I don't have anything holding me here anymore. My dog is gone, so I wouldn't be leaving her. My relationship is over.
Yeah.
Other than like my friends, which we've all at that point, like we've all been friends for so many years that like it's not gonna matter if I go and come back or something like that. And I'd never been out of the country. And I was like, I emailed the woman back and I said, hey, here's my like transcript from my undergrad. Does this fit if I want to apply to an actual course over there? And she came back and said, yeah, absolutely. Send in an application. So I sent an application. I got in.
Nice. Okay.
And I got a passport expedited, got a visa expedited,
Yeah.
which was very expensive.
They are.
And quit all of my jobs and found a roommate online through like this university website and booked a flight one way over to Scotland and went to grad school over there.
Fuck, man.
And it was quite an experience for someone who had never been outside of the country and grew up with a family that was very I don't want to say like anti other cultures, but just very
insular,
closed-minded. Yeah, just kind of like, well, everything you need is right here. Why would you want to go anywhere else? Like,
yeah.
Why do you care about other cultures? Why do you want to leave? Like, you don't need to. And I, even from a young child, was always like, I want to see all the things and know about all the stuff. And like, why wouldn't you want to go? Like, how could you not? If you get it, like,
for inquisitive minds, it's hard not to like, at your heart, you're an explorer. At least for me, it's like, yeah, I'm totally interested in all those things. They're right there over there, and like, don't you want to see?
There's a whole world,
yeah,
that exists that like you can go to.
Yeah.
You have that option.
Worst case scenario, you hate it and you never go back again. Like you can, but typically
you can book another flight.
You can book another flight. Like I think what happens with that is like you don't realize the experiences you can have by traveling, like and just the fun with that.
Yeah. College was a culture shock for me, having grown up in a very conservative household. And then this was yet another culture shock for me because I had never been around so many people from so many different places. And, because we live in Missouri. Like, it's not exactly a hub for, like, international travel.
It should have been in a lot of ways, but...
Yeah, but Chicago got the railroad.
And we were like, no, we'll stay with a steamboat. That's a great industry to stay with. I'm sure there's more context with that, but that's what I know.
So Edinburgh was kind of a city where most of the people that you met there weren't actually from there.
Gotcha.
And every single one of my classmates was from a different country. And we were a small group where there were like 12 to 18 of us, depending on where at in the program you were. Because some people left and other people joined in. And then we kind of split off and did our own thing in different specializations. But that was really cool for me. And my first roommate was Polish and her boyfriend was from Scotland. And then I roomed with one of my classmates and her 3 friends who were all from India. Yeah,
I was trying to find a segue to that.
Well, okay. Here it is.
Yeah.
So I had been over there a few months and I realized that I had joined the volleyball club and a bunch of stuff, and I was in a poker league and I was spending a lot of my time in the city, and our apartment was outside the city and the buses didn't run past like 11 p.m. Well, I was usually out past 11 p.m. And so
You're in
then
Scotland,
I would
why
get
not?
stuck and have to stay at somebody. So I'd have to like pre-pack clothes and make sure I had everything with me, which gets annoying, right? Like you want to go out for the night. Well, now I got to drop my stuff off at somebody's place and make sure I have somewhere to crash till the buses start running again at 6 a.m. It was really annoying. And so I moved into the city. These girls had someone move out and had a room open. And so I was like, hey, like, let me room with you guys. And so that was really kind of cool for all of us because I, in addition to like a culturally lacking home, I really didn't have very food adventurous family either. And so for those of you that aren't Kanal, I grew up not even knowing that many vegetables were available fresh. Most of the things that I ate came out of a can or a freezer bag. I had never seen fresh spinach until I was in high school. Or green beans, for that matter.
You just watched a lot of Popeye, apparently. You're just like, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's where my mom got the idea.
Yeah.
But, and salt and pepper were the only two seasonings in our house. Maybe some garlic powder and onion powder from some random recipe that my mom used once.
I have found many people from like Caucasian backgrounds that have said, oh yeah, salt and pepper is like the best seasoning. And I'm like, is that the only seasoning that you use? And the more stories I hear like this, I'm like, oh, so that's not a joke. That was real.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I get into this apartment with these 4 Indian girls and they have a literal turntable of spices that they have.
I got one.
I don't know what any of them are. Yeah, right?
I got one in my drawer right here. Yeah.
I was so excited. I was like, whoa, what are these? There were like 20 different things. I don't know what any of them are. And so they would make all the food and they'd be like, here, try this. Here, try this. Like they loved sharing their food, which I was super grateful for because it was all delicious.
Yes.
But I would take like whatever they made. So like 2 of them did not eat spicy food and I believe were vegetarian and the other ones did eat spicy food and were not vegetarian. So we had a mix of foods in the house. But I remember like taking pinches of spices out of the rack and just like smelling the spice and being like, yeah, that seems like it would go in here. Yeah, that seems like it would go in here. And just like throwing stuff in and they'd be looking at me like, you realize that's going to be spicy, right? And I would be like, yeah, no, this is great.
Please.
And I discovered that like I liked flavor. Lo and behold.
And that is the key difference. People say spice and they think immediately heat, but no. Like, I mean, ginger is a spice. I mean, like, cumin's a spice. And they're not necessarily, like, burning your tongue and everything. It's adding different flavor to what you're eating. And spice is such a misnomer for me whenever I hear people talk about it. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
So I use spicy in 2 contexts. So I'll say spicy to mean something is spiced.
Right.
Or I will say spicy to say, whew, this is
hot.
This is
right?
hot.
Yeah.
And not white people hot either. I love going to ethnic restaurants and asking for hot spice.
Yeah.
And having to then like reiterate, I don't mean white people hot. I mean how you would normally do it. Like your actual hot.
It is a thing. I've talked to many people.
You have to clarify.
I no, it's a thing. It's a thing. They're like, oh yeah, no problem, and immediately they're just like white spicy on the card, and they have to do that because they've gotten so many complaints from people.
Oh, I'll bet.
So like, it's a survival strategy on their part. But I've definitely seen like bills come back, and it says like, we went to an Indian restaurant with my friend and I. He loves Indian food, and he's like, specifically, please make this Indian spicy, and like they wrote on the card IS. Which I'm like, that has to be Indian spicy. And I'm like, okay, this is a thing. This is okay. All right.
Yep. I have told wait staff before when they asked, like, you know, if they didn't have like a scale and they were like, well, you know, because a lot of places, you know, it's subjective, right? Like some places will say like Thai hot, and that's a completely different thing than someone else's Thai hot.
Oh, yeah. And also it depends on the day sometimes. Like,
yeah. So I remember a couple times I have literally told wait staff, like, I would like for my eyes to water and my lips to burn a little, and that would be perfect.
I want to die eating this, please.
And they're like, okay. And then they'll bring it out. And some places, you know, they'll do me a favor and they'll bring like extra spice out just in case I want more. And they'll be like, here, you can add it as you please.
Right.
And I usually will. I'll always add a little more in. I might look like I'm not enjoying it because like I'm blowing my nose and like and my face might turn a little red. But like, oh, I love it. I love it so much. I feel like I was deprived of flavor for so long in my life.
You're just catching up with
that
it now.
I'm just like, I must enjoy all of the things.
Oh my God.
Like, to the extreme.
Yeah. It's so sad when I hear people like to say they don't like, oh, I can't do spicy. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Man, you're missing out.
You've obviously not tried the right spicy.
I think that's probably what happens too, is like they are so scared of these stories and they're like, oh, I don't want to have an unpleasant experience. I'm like, you're not going to. Like, you'll be fine. Like, just try different things and then ask them for like to turn down the heat here and there. Like, you'll be good.
My new favorite thing to do with my parents, because since COVID happened and my mom like lost her sense of smell and taste.
Oh no.
She's been eating things that she wouldn't normally eat because she can't really like it's coming back in different ways, but
Sure.
she ate fish for like the first time in her life. I didn't grow up with seafood. I love seafood.
Yeah?
I didn't know I loved seafood until I was in college.
Oh, fair.
Because we never had it. We never went anywhere that served it. We never because both my parents are like, ugh, fish, gross. And
it's all slimy.
it's all gross. And I was like, do you realize how many different kinds of seafood there are and how many different ways there are to prepare each of those kinds? Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
And so my new favorite thing to do with my mom is like, she's like, oh, I tried this and it was bad. And I was like, well, how did you try it? There's usually not just like one version of one thing that is the end all be all. And like, not just my parents, I think people have a tendency to like try something once that's maybe a little outside of their comfort zone. They don't necessarily like it. And they go, okay, anything that's that,
hard pass.
Yeah. I'm not doing that ever again. And they like just don't ever delve any further.
How you prepare the food makes all the difference.
How you prepare it, like
Yeah.
the different ways you can cook it, different ways you can spice it, different things you can serve it with. Like, you can combine different foods together and give it a completely different texture, taste, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's just a difference in thinking of the kind of people who are like more closed-minded versus the ones that are like open to experience and things like that. And I think that happens a lot I'm going to segue.
Yeah.
In like social situations too. Like, people have one bad experience with one type of person from one thing,
Right.
and they go, all these people suck. And then they just like never speak to another person like that ever again. And like, that is, it's the same sort of mindset of like, well, I tried this one thing this one time and I didn't like it, so like, the end. Instead of like, okay, like I tried this one thing this one time, maybe there's another thing like it that's out there that I would like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can find that thing. You know, and I have foods over the years. Now I'm going backwards.
It's okay. We're talking
where
about
like
food stuff.
where I've tried them and been like, oh, nope. And then it's been a couple years and I'll be somewhere and somebody will be like, oh, do you like this? Because they do. And I'm like, I've had it before and I didn't really like it, but like, this is a different, like, I'll see it's a different preparation or something. I'm like, I'll try it, you know? And sometimes it's like, oh, nope, I still don't like that.
Nope.
And other times it's like, oh, well, this version's actually pretty good. Like, good to know. Mm-hmm. I've learned over the years to be more accepting and open to new experiences like that because I grew up thinking the same way that my parents did, of like, you know, this dichotomous thing of like, all of this is good or bad. Like, everything has to be good or bad, or you have to like it or you don't.
All or nothing thinking. It's not healthy.
Like that all or nothing mentality. And it's like, no, like sometimes there's like, okay, so like, I don't like cocktail shrimp. It's disgusting. I don't like the texture. I don't like the flavor. I don't like that it's cold.
Yeah.
I hate it. I've tried it many times. It's never going to be a thing. Yeah. Right? Grilled shrimp. Love it.
Oh, grilled shrimp is great.
Absolutely love it.
Beer battered grilled shrimp. Fantastic.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
I might get some tonight.
But like, you know, stuff like that where it's like, I could have tried cocktail shrimp, which was the first version of shrimp I ever had, and been like, oh, this is disgusting. And then just never looked at shrimp ever again. But I was like, oh, okay, well, my last experience with shrimp was not that great, but like, this is a different kind of shrimp. Maybe this shrimp is a little better, or maybe it's not, but I can't find out until I actually try it. So yeah, tried it. I had a friend that like grilled shrimp for me. And I was like, oh no, like, I don't like shrimp, you know, like, cause my only experience had been the cocktail shrimp that I didn't like. And I was like, oh no, I don't like shrimp, but they made me dinner and like, it's rude to not eat their dinner. No, yeah. Can't say no. And I tried it and I was like, oh, this is actually, I really like this. This is good.
Can you write this down for me?
And I'm so glad, like, I'm so glad for having done that because, you know, now I think like, well, if I'd never been open to trying again or trying something slightly different, like I wouldn't know that I loved it and I wouldn't now like go out seeking it or making it for myself or something like that. Like that wouldn't exist in my life.
Yeah. So did this definitely happen when you went to India too? Because you got invited to a wedding at some point.
Yes. So one of the roommates that I lived with in Scotland, had a wedding and invited me over there. One of the other ones had also invited me in a previous year, but I was not financially able to make it work. And then this time I really wasn't financially able to make this work either, but I I had a credit card now and I was like, you know what? I'm never going to get this opportunity. Like this is not an opportunity that just comes along, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to put it on the credit card, like my flight and everything, and I'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go because I want this experience. Like I want to do this.
I think that's a good thing to put, you know, to be in. I hate to say this, but it's a good thing to be in debt for, you know? Because the experience will really...
I would not take it back.
Yeah.
At all.
Agreed.
And it's not like I was like struggling in debt because of that for like 20 years, you know?
Right. Like
not like my education. But you know, it didn't even matter because like the experience was what I was going for. The money, you know, when you first put that on and you're like, holy shit, I just spent all that. Like that's a little bit of a shock. But like once I was there and I had that experience and I was at my friend's wedding and I have all of those memories and things now, like I would have paid more for that, you know?
That's beautiful. I love that.
It was amazing. I still have the clothes that they gave me when I was over there that I bought over there. I can't wear them here because people will start screaming cultural appropriation. But
if you come to the Indian weddings and if you come to Indian things, like come to the movies, like, you know, we'll make it happen. We'll figure it out. I'll start inviting you to the volley party as well. We'll figure it out. Because I do feel bad because they're so colorful to wear in the first place. Like
I loved it. I loved being over there and wearing all of the clothes and being at all the events.
Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, Sri Lankan, that whole subcontinent cultures. We fucking garb it up, man. Like it is beautiful.
Kidding.
It is beautiful.
And everybody was so happy to have me there. Everybody wanted to share like all the religious ceremonies that they were doing. They involved me in, and I'm not a religious person at all. My upbringing in Christianity made me actually like very averse to
that happens,
like churches and things like that. But like they were just like, they didn't care. I mean, they didn't ask, they didn't care. They were just like, here, you're a part of this. And I was like, all right, I'm here.
Word.
Let's do it. You know, there were times I had to eat certain things or have like markings put on me or things like that. Mm-hmm. For the wedding, we did like a turmeric thing, which ended up burning my skin a little bit, and I had to take off.
I remember you talking about this.
And I was like, hey, I'm like not trying to be disrespectful, but like my skin is on fire and I don't know why this is happening, but it's happening. I need to get this off of me. I'm sorry. But it was so cool for me because, you know, here my religions growing up were kind of exclusive. Like if you don't fit the mold, if you're a little different, if you're a little weird or whatever, like we're all gonna stare at you and be like, what are you doing here?
Right.
Whereas they were like, here's this person, none of them knew me. Like I just got brought in with my friend and they were just like, hey, come here, have this food, have this thing, have it, you know, join this circle. Like we're gonna do a song, we're gonna do a prayer, we're gonna do this, like, you know. And they would instruct me when I didn't know, like, you know, like the taking the shoes off to walk onto temple grounds and things like that. Like Americans don't do that shit.
No.
But they would tell me ahead of time, like, hey, here's the deal. Here's what you have to do. And, you know, it was just respectful. And I was curious, you know, I was like, I want to know about all this. Like, this is obviously very important to all of my friends and all of this culture and things like that. And I wanted to know about it. I wanted to be a part of it and experience it. And they were very welcoming in everything. And nobody looked at me wearing a sari and was like, what's this white person doing in a sari? You know, like they were just like, oh my God, you look beautiful. And everything was great.
Awesome. I'm really glad you had that experience because there's something in Indian culture, like, or just air quotes, brown culture. It's like, no matter what, even though you always hear about the religious strife, the political strife, the classism that always happens that they're famous for. Everyone's like, oh yeah, the caste system. I'm like, yes, Calm down. Yes, I am familiar with this.
I mean, it's evident
It is
when you're over there.
It is very
It may not
evident.
exist on paper, but it's still there.
It's still there.
You can see it.
I went there 3 years ago, and it's still very much there, too. But there is a sense of hospitality. My mom, and I've seen it with the rest of my family, they really like anyone who comes in as a guest is considered and treated like family. Now, sure, do we have political, classist, and ideological strife? 100%. But contradictory things can exist in the same place. It's called life. And I feel like stories like that need to be heard more and more.
Yeah. Well, it's like, so when I first went over there, they have servants, right? Like
yes.
the more well-to-do people. And the way that they treated them
it's not great.
wasn't, I mean, they weren't like rude necessarily, at least the ones that I saw. But they, you could tell they were less than.
Yeah,
and
unfortunately.
Coming from here, where like people are more self-sufficient and you help each other, like clean up the dishes and like do that. Like that's a group activity.
Right.
And over there, like if I tried to like even stand up and take my cup from my tea into the kitchen, they were like, what are you doing? Like that's that person's job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like ironing everyone's clothes for the wedding or whatever it was. Like they would just hand them all this stuff and be like, go do this. Here, go do this. No thanks, no nothing. Just like it was expected. And for me, I'm sitting there like, I know these aren't bad people, right? Like they've been very generous to me and everything, but like seeing that like in the same room, the same people with two different methods of interacting, it was kind of like.
It's very dismissive. It's very like almost seemingly rude.
Yeah. And and what am I going to say? It's not my culture. It's not my country. I don't, it's not the same. And it's not my place to be like I'm not going to stand up and be like, how dare you should say thank you when your staff does, like.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
You're not going to do anything. You're not going to change anything there.
Yeah.
And so that was another way that was a little difficult to be respectful of the culture, because to me it seemed wrong, right? To treat someone that way. But the culture that I was in, that was just how it was. And there was nothing wrong with it to them. And so for me to come in as an outsider and be like,
how dare
excuse
you?
Me, how,
right.
That's not my place, right? Like, and in the end, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the servants too, that's what they did.
Yeah.
When I was interacting with them and tried to do something, they were like, no. Like, don't help me. Don't,
Sure.
And so that was kind of like, oh, okay, like this goes both ways. Like,
right.
Like I'm obviously not supposed to be doing, and everybody knows it.
Like it's so weird to bring this up because I was just listening to a podcast and they talked about the stereotype of Chinese citizens coming to America and being pushy, very rude, very aggressive. The thing is, in China, that is the norm because there's 1.2 billion people. Literally, you are pushing for space. And
I've seen like the videos and stuff
yeah.
of the train. Like you literally
can't
get around.
Yeah, you can't get around unless you literally push your body. Like even when I went to India and I was like waiting in line, I didn't understand this because my parents would talk about it all the time. But I'm like, I had no concept of what they meant. Literally, people will come and like almost shove me aside to get in front of me in line, and I'm like, get the fuck away from me! What are you doing? You don't realize it until you've been in a different setting for the whole thing. But undoubtedly, your inquisitive mind has led you to these great experiences. So definitely, like, you've done a lot of things, and the adage that I get told sometimes is like, you're a jack of all trades, or you try doing a bunch of different things and you had a bunch of different experiences. I think what I've answered is like, you have a very inquisitive sense and you love trying different things.
I mean, that's what life is about.
That's
right?
what it should be about.
Like,
I think that's what it should be about.
Experiencing your existence.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes this mentality of like, I must pick this thing, be good at this thing, do this thing, and like tunnel vision basically your life. And here's the order of operations for how a human lives.
Eat, sleep, work, breathe, and then repeat,
Yeah, childhood, school, college, career,
family, I guess,
spouse, kids, home, whatever it is. And I mean, I've done so many jobs, I don't even know if I could tell you how many at this point in time, and not all of them in the same thing. And finding and doing things that enrich your existence and your understanding of the world around you. And, I don't think that you necessarily even have to get great at things. Just trying them in the first place is an experience and gives you, I mean, I've done all of these things. I don't feel like I've accomplished anything fantastic in my life, right? But like I can sit here and talk to you about hundreds of different things that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other.
But it's fun.
But like that's what makes the human experience worth having. Like you can then go and interact with other people who have their own stories because they were also open to experiences. And that's how you become an interesting person.
I agree. And that just whole thing came fucking full circle, and I love it. And
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I have a canal random question for you. There was one time we got lunch. It was maybe a month or two ago, and I randomly, because it's me, I brought up something about snipers, and you immediately knew about what I was talking about. And so it has been stuck in the back of my head since that day, and I keep forgetting to bring it up, but I wrote it down yesterday when I was preparing for today. How did you take courses in sniping? How did you know about this? Like, what's the background on that?
So fun fact, I actually taught a hunter education course with the Missouri Department of Conservation when I interned with them in college. So that's where that came from.
Okay.
And that was kind of funny. So it was a Missouri Girls Discovered Nature. It was a program that one of my fellow, I can't say coworker because I was an intern, but one of the people there had come up with where
colleagues, I guess. Yeah.
So they took girls from the age of 7 to 14 and taught them outdoor survival skills and hunting education and skills. And so I was one of the assistant instructors, and I did the course with them also and went through the same certification process. And it was kind of funny for me because I grew up in a household that like the only reason I had ever shot guns before was because of one of my boyfriend, because his family was more rural and went hunting and things like that.
Right,
and he was very into it. And so he kind of taught me, that was my introduction. But this was me teaching, some of these girls that were, half my age had been hunting with their dads since they were little. And so like
gotcha.
they, they'd already bagged their first deer or whatever it was by the age of like 8.
Like pulling in the ammo cartridges like nothing. And like,
but it was it's a different world in that environment, right? Like they're taught from a very early age, like here's what this is what it's used for, this is, how you do and do not handle it and things like that. And that's all stuff that we went over in the course as well. That's kind of where that came from.
Okay.
So
that makes a lot more sense now.
Again, just a random experience.
I love it. No, I absolutely love it.
I
was like, well, fuck, how did you? Because I said something, I can't remember the context, but you were talking like, your eyes will readjust. You got to put like a blinder on.
And I think you were talking about the different stances that you could take too, and like how being prone is like the most stable, and like that. Yeah,
I think you're right. That's totally. See, you got all that came full circle. The way you look at conversations and everything. How about that? We got to call it right there. That's just how you put a button on.
Good with it. Mic drop.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I know we've talked about this for months.
We've been talking about this for a while. Okay?
A long time.
Oh, very long time.
It's been a long time in the making.
Yeah, but it's all good. All right.
We out.
Hey, fan peeps. Thanks for listening, and I'd love any feedback you have for me. Please follow the Facebook page, They Need a Hobby, and follow us everywhere, social media-wise, under the handle @TNAHpod. That goes for Twitter and Instagram, and one of these days, I'll be super popular. If you can hold it like closer, if you're making out with it, it's the best. But like,
I don't really want to make out with it.
Okay.
I don't know who else it's made out with, and like,
I mean, it's made out with good people.